Michael Smith here. Today we're going to get an introduction to applied combatives training. Applied combatives training is something I've been working on for about 15 years, primarily for law enforcement, corrections officers, and the military. It's also obviously very useful for civilians in the sense of street fights and self-defense and stuff like that. It's a principle-based approach to combatives in the sense we're not going to work on fancy techniques and anything too complicated. And some of the principles I think are very, very common sense and obvious. One of the primary fundamental approaches in applied combatives is what we call the primal sequence of combat. Every combative situation is going to go through what we would call a trajectory or an arc of interaction. The primal sequence of combat goes like this: closing, crashing, controlling, and then crushing. Closing is often what we refer to as bridging the gap, closing the gap, because inevitably you're going to have to touch each other, you're going to have to tussle, lock horns, and deal with that. Crashing is the locking horns moment when you're basically deflecting a weapon or striking the other person, and now you have to deal with their hands, their knees, and their structure to some degree. So we move from crashing, which we'll see in a few minutes is very obvious, into controlling. And controlling isn't necessarily holding them in some fancy headlock, although that would be nice. Controlling primarily is having a sense that their weight is off balance, or their weapons are being pushed away from you so that your opponent is busy getting their weapons back online towards you. As long as you can control the direction of their weapons or the stability of their structure, their central nervous system is just a step behind whatever you're doing, and in a funny way you can say, now it's your turn. And in applied combatives, it's always your turn, or else you're losing. When it gets to from closing to crashing to controlling, assuming you've got the bit of their weight, a bit of their weapons, then we move on to crushing. And crushing is basically a quick way of saying delivering very specific amounts of violence. Now, that probably doesn't sound very nice, and combat sometimes isn't very nice, but when you think about delivering violence, you're going to think about delivering two things: pain and actual damage. Now, if you're in a situation where the threat is uncertain, it's a wedding, it's people screwing around a little bit or something like that, you don't have to be tactically decisive and destructive. You might just offer the person enough pain for them to demonstrate whether or not they're serious. If they're clearly serious, there's more than one person, you're protecting someone else primarily, then you have to do enough damage, enough harm to the other person's body, that they're now basically in a situation where they can't function completely. That could be a dislocated shoulder, enough pain to the testicles, enough pain to the throat, the eyes, other places like that. But it's more than just pain in the sense of, ow, it's damage. That person is now no longer capable of continuing with all of their faculties, right? Primarily in applied combatives, we never think of ourselves as in a self-defense situation, because in a defense situation, you're psychologically losing already. So we want to think of this as, again, as a combative situation. And I think the clearest description of combatives is your role in society is now to move into harm's way and decisively cease the other person's capacity to continue to do harm in any way. Right? If you're a police officer, you're a corrections officer, obviously in the military things are a little more final. If you're a civilian and you're protecting a friend, your child, your spouse, yourself, somebody on the street or something like that, it's the same situation. You're moving into harm's way, and you decisively, in the least amount of time possible, have to cease the other person, the attacker's capacity to do harm. That makes sense? Okay, so that's the essence of applied combatives training, and most of what we do is based on hardwired instincts that are in your body already, so in a way they're free. You just have to get yourself into some environments, some training situations where those capacities are given back to you. Okay. So one of the fundamental principles of applied combatives training is getting into your body in a way that feels very structured, very confident, and very familiar. If you're not familiar with what you're doing with your own body, your ability to actually handle what the other person's doing is quite diminished, because you're all freaking out with respect to your own body, not just with respect to the other person. So we have a thing that we try and do in every situation that goes like this: post, pivot, and then press forward. Now, really important when we're doing this is when you post, you get used to dropping most of your weight into one leg, doesn't matter which, and that you actually drop your physical center of gravity about 3 inches. We call that ceiling gravity. If I can do that, I've loaded up the lower muscles of my body and the muscles of my pelvis, and as I get ready to interact with my upper body by pivoting, then I'm loading up the muscles basically between my knees and my rib cage, which makes sure ours the most dynamically strong. So let's try that a few times. So you're just going to drop your weight into one leg and lift one foot up in front of you. Now this isn't meant to be like, you know, a kung fu move or anything. It's just meant to get you familiar with, you need to have a really good base of support. And if I wanted to move, my front leg needs to be unweighted. If I want to protect myself, it needs to be unweighted. If I want to hit the other person, it needs to be unweighted. Right? That should make sense. So one leg and then the other. Let your arms be loose. They'll just end up where they end up. So again, when we have this idea of this coming out, this foot could be kicking any number of ways, checking the other person's structure or movement, kicking them in the balls, obviously, and your hands want to be having that same forward intention, forward intensity. So post and just readiness at this point. Now, a way to make this workable at home, pick various points in a room. There's lots of places to look in this room. If I just pick a spot over there, and the next spot over here, and again, I'm not trying to think of this as a stance, it's just the beginning of an awareness of my own body, that I can basically turn to anything within my surroundings that's as I'm getting ready. An interesting principle that's going to connect the dots about this is the faster I throw my hands up, interestingly enough, just with physics, is the faster my body drops into the ground. So I try and pick up my hands and my body kind of like this, it doesn't work. But if I throw my hands like that, notice how when you do that, your body naturally has to drop. So I can throw my hands up really fast and bring my body down. Right? And this could be a strike, a deflection, anything else. I'm using the momentum of my hands to drive my body weight into the ground. You feel that? Okay. So that's just the beginning idea of posting. Right? Hands fly up as fast as is comfortable, and I drop my body weight 3 inches, and now I'm ready to pivot. So as soon as I start to post, I need to feel that my body can turn, depending on where my weight is. It has to be able to work no matter what. As soon as I drop down, my weight has to be able, my body has to be able to turn left and right. Right? So if I'm going to duck, if I'm going to block, if I'm going to strike, whatever I need to do, it has to do with the turning of my torso. You can punch like this, and it's going to be about as strong as this muscle. You can punch with your whole body, right, and send all of the force you can create into the other person's body. But you can only do that if you have a pivot. Right? So I post, and then I want to feel my body just turning left and right. Turning left and right. At this point, I want the other foot on the ground. I don't want my weight on the front leg yet. I just want to feel that I have what's called a future base, a place to put my weight if I decide to move forward. Right. Yep. And it all happens here. Right, so the arms spring up. That throws me down. And now I'm ready to just pivot. So just do that at random points in the room, and then pivot back and forth. And if you can, think like you're kind of weightlifting or moving something out of your way. So I post and pivot, thinking about moving something out of my way. So again, this isn't thinking about striking yet, it's not thinking about blocking yet. You're just connecting your awareness to your body in a way that eventually is going to be absolutely familiar and confident. This is what it takes to be a predatory animal and move effectively. As I pivot, now I have the use of my limbs. And what I need to be aware of as I post and pivot is the most dangerous thing in movement, especially in combat, is lateral forces. Stuff that can throw me off balance. I go to make a huge punch and I miss, and then I'm off balance. I need to recover all of my pivot, all of my lateral momentum. And that's going to take years to refine all of that. So that's why we start with it, because, well, it's going to take years. So, before I get into the press part, I just want to look at using post and pivot to do a very simple kind of cover. We call this a windshield wiper, and like the windshield wipers of your car. So I'm going to post, and in this sense I'm going to feel that I'm being defensive or protecting myself. So I'm going to just naturally do what my animal body wants to do, because the other person has the initiative, they frighten me. So then I'm going to use pivot to just cover the vital areas of my body with my arm. Now, ideally, I see somebody coming and I just whack him in the head because, well, I have time. But if you don't see them coming, you have to protect yourself. Your body has deep hardwiring on how to do it. Right? So we're going to try that post. And as I drop in, thinking of, oh no, I'm going to get hit, and maybe you will, then you have to come out of that using pivot, right, as fast as you can, and then be ready to press or to fight back. Right? Now, take some practice to build up speed, so we're working on it until you're ready really fast. Right, so cover and come back. I know it's hard to train thinking, oh shit, but in a sense of self-defense, you might be surprised. So cover, and then pivot, come out, and be ready to go crazy. So as you pivot, I want lots of movement of my torso, lots of momentum going into my arm. I might be really big, I might have to check, 300-pound guy trying to swing on my head again, right? So I'm pivoting and moving my body forward to pivot, and then get ready to press in, strike, grab, knee, whatever. So I have to throw lots of power into it. Right? So try and do that, and as you do it, step forward. Keep a bit of your weight back, but ready to keep moving forward. So there's a trick we're going to use, and it's going to be a useful trick for not only this environment, but also for striking, where as I post, pivot, and right now I'm covering myself instead of attacking, which we'll look at in a sec, I need to take this circle and make it go somewhere. Because if I just go like this, right, I just gave myself whiplash. Because I didn't recover my momentum, I just stopped. So you need to practice for making a circle that could turn into something else. So if you slow it down, going like that, and gradually tighten it up to where you're just coming out, 100%, then you can't come out 100% because your body instinctively will slow down to keep you from giving yourself whiplash. So work your way up with that spiral, cover yourself, and get ready to do just grab onto their face.